Okay, so what we're talking about this chapter is the midpoint formula. And so midpoint formula is just what's in the middle, and it's just the averages. And so because what I'm doing is I have 2 points, and I'm finding the middle of those points, I'm taking the average of those points. And remember, average is you add up all the numbers and you divide by how many numbers. Well, I'm adding some x's and I'm adding y's, and so that's why I divide by 2. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to label our points. And remember, that means that we're going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to plug our numbers into our formula right here. And then we're going to figure out what the sum is on the top. A common mistake is people will try to do all this as one step in the calculator, and the calculator is not going to do your order of operations correctly. So what you do is you just figure out the answer on the top, and then you're going to divide by 2, okay? And that's what the next step is, to divide or reduce. When you're done, your answer is a point, an ordered pair, so you need to write it as parentheses. Okay, so let's look at this first problem. So we have all these coordinates, and so we need to find the midpoint of AB. So it is helpful if you rewrite them. So A is 2, 4, oh, that's ugly. 2, 4, and B is 6, 8. I don't write up here because sometimes you use the points multiple times and it can get confusing. Take the 4 or 5 seconds it takes to actually rewrite it. So now I'm going to label. This 2 is the first x I see, so it's x1. This 4 is the first y I see, so this is y1. And then x2 and y2. Okay, so now I plug it into my formula. And if you notice, x's are on top of the first fraction, and then y's are on top of the second fraction. We never mix our x's and y's. Okay, so now my first x is 2, plus my second x is 6, all divided by 2. I'm going to put a comma. There's a comma in the formula. And then now I do my y's. My first y is 4, my second y is 8, and all over 2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually find the sum. Well, the top here is 8 over 2 and 12 over 2. And then the last thing I do is I have to reduce. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So my midpoint is 4, 6. All right, same thing for number 2. I'm going to start off by writing my points. So B is at 6, 8, and C is at -3, 5. Okay, what I would like you guys to do is I would like you to label your points and plug in. And once you think you have it plugged in, press play. Okay, so you should have had x1, y1, x2, y2. And so it would have been 6 plus -3 over 2, and 8 plus 5 over 2. Well, 6 plus -3 is 3 over 2, and 8 plus 5 is 13 over 2. So you can actually leave the answers like this, but if you don't like them like this, you prefer to see decimals, you can also do 3 divided by 2, which is 1.5, and 13 divided by 2, which is 6.5. I will accept either of those answers. Okay? It just depends on what you want to do. And again, I couldn't actually reduce the fraction, so I can simplify them by making them decimals. Okay, so last one, same thing. I'm going to label my points. DC is the same as CD. I'm just going to go in order. So -3, 5. And D is -7, -1. So we're going to label the points. X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Okay, I'd like you to do this whole problem, and when you think you have it, press play. Okay, so you should have done -3 plus -7 over 2, 5 plus -1 over 2, a -3 and a -7 is a -10 over 2, and 5 plus a negative 4 is a positive 4 over 2. Both of those can reduce, and so my answer is negative 5, comma 2. So it's not that hard. It's a pretty easy formula to use, but I will tell you where people are going to make a mistake is when they do not take the time to label. Label your points. This does not take that much time, and it usually cuts down 90% of errors. So remember these steps. Label your points, plug in your values, find your answers on the top, and then reduce or divide. Okay, so this last problem we need to do is going to be a little different, okay? And what makes it different is I'm giving you the midpoint, okay? And a point A, we need to find the other point. So this is going to be a little different. All right, so let's see. We know that this right here is our midpoint formula. And so this gives us x of the midpoint, and it gives us y of the midpoint. And so we're going to have to do this last problem a little differently. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and label this. My m is 5 and 2. So again, this is x of the midpoint, this is y of the midpoint. And then let's go find out what a was. A is 2, 4. Okay, I lost my space. Let's insert more space. Okay. So now this is x1 and y1. All right, so I'm going to focus on the midpoint for x first. So the midpoint of x is 5. So this is going to be 5 is equal to, and it equals this. So x1 is 2. I don't know x2, so I'm going to say that's just x, and then divided by 2. And so this problem, once you get it set up, is something you should be able to solve pretty easily. Remember that this big thing here says divide, and the way you get rid of a divide by 2 is I multiply by 2. And so I multiply 2 on both sides. Now, on the right side, your goal was to get rid of this 2. So I don't actually distribute, I just cross this off. And on the left side, 2 times 5 is 10. So I get 10 is equal to 2 plus x. And now you just have to get rid of that positive 2. And the way we get rid of a positive 2 is by subtracting 2 on both sides. So we get x is 8. So for the other endpoint, my first answer is 8. All right, now let's do the same thing for y. And so my y midpoint is 2. And this equals my y point plus my other y, and I don't know what that is. All right, so that's the setup for it. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video, see if you can solve it, and then we'll go ahead and show you how it's done. Okay, so hopefully you times by 2 first on both sides. So you get 4 is equal to 4 plus y. And then you minus 4 on both sides. And you get 0 as y. So that's the other endpoint. So what happened on this problem is this is our midpoint. This was point A. We just found this point. We found where the other endpoint is. So the algebra is a little trickier, and you have to make sure that you set the m equal to the other point. But it's not that bad of a problem once you use your formula, plug it in, and solve.